The Cleveland Silent Film Festival is committed to honoring Cleveland's cultural heritage while also presenting films that spotlight the work of international and underrepresented filmmakers, actors, and musicians. They also engage wonderful speakers with expertise in silent films and film music for both student and public talks. If you want to find out more about the CSFF, head on over to their website, which you can find at www.clevelandsilentfilmfestival.org. Or just hang on and we're going to talk a lot more about the group in this episode. So just sit tight. Hello everybody and welcome to the newest episode of the Golden Silent Films podcast, where we have gone mobile. That's right, the show is on the road and crossing state lines into Cleveland, Ohio, to see a screening of 1925 Sir Sister from Paris being held in the Cleveland Public Library. An amazing building, architecturally, visually, everything about it's really cool. And it's got a Superman exhibit, but that has not biased me. That's just a cool addition. But I'm about to head into the screening right now, and we're going to talk about the film a little later. So I shall talk to you in the meat of the episode. Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the temporary Northeast Ohio theater of the Golden Silent Films podcast, where we are fixing to take a vintage cinematic tour of the land. There is so much great silent film heritage just up the road from Pittsburgh, we couldn't let sports rivalries get in the way of cool movie history and an awesome screening event. Before we continue this travelogue of sorts, let's talk about the various Golden Silent Films podcast social media outlets. As usual, head on over to Golden Silence Cast on Instagram for up-to-date info on this little show. And for all of you folks on X or Twitter, just follow at Golden Silence 1 or search for Golden Silence Cast and we should magically appear before your very eyes. Our newest social media hangout, obviously, as you've heard, is Bluesky, where you can find us at Golden Silence Cast. All of these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you are interested in checking us out, much like someone would from the Cleveland Public Library, but that is a story for a little later in the episode. We would love to have you on these road trips with us. At these social spaces, you're going to get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials, and fun photos of our housebound podcasts, Gizmo and Soda. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Amazon Music, please leave comments, reviews, ratings, or all of the above. Our show has been around for over 5 years, and we've only received 17 reviews on iTunes. We would love to see those numbers keep growing, and you awesome silent film fans out there can make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help so much. So live your best review leaving life, and help our show grow a little and reach fellow silent film fans all over the world. Dropping those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcasts, and lets us know how we can improve. We have actually recently gotten a few messages about stuff that we can do better on the show, and we look forward to implementing some of those changes. So, let it be known that your voice does matter here on the show. As always, we are grateful for all of that feedback and always want to bring you the best show humanly possible. And please subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be sketchy and irregular, if you are subscribed, you will never miss an episode, and the moment that new content does drop, it will go straight to your listening device of choice. We are traveling our way through the 5th season and don't want you to miss a second. And as for YouTube, we are pushing to get 100 subscribers before the end of 2025, so you know the magic words. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell on YouTube for those notifications. Now, ever since this podcast began, I've had this idea of spotlighting a single silent city rattling around my brain forever. Everyone knows that Hollywood and New York City are both filled with their fair share of cinematic history. But there are so many other towns across this country, and actually across this globe, that also bring the silent history. So much silent history that the Golden Silent Films podcast was left with no choice but to become the Rand McNally of the silent film world. And it is especially cool because the best stories come from the most unlikely of places. From the cinematic mecca of Fort Lee, New Jersey, to scenic Jacksonville, Florida, and everywhere in between, there are incredible people, places, and things just waiting to be discussed. And obviously, Pittsburgh is going to be included in that prestigious group in a later episode. As I scrolled the social medias, I came across a screening of the Constance Talmadge film, Her Sister from Paris, being shown at the Cleveland Public Library. This was an event that appealed to me on so many fronts. First, it was a film and star I knew very little about. Second, it was being shown in a super cool venue. Third, it was being presented by a group of fellow silent film lovers. That is a hat trick of cool things that will hook me instantly. Really, any two of those three is enough, and to find all three of three means this was a must-attend event. So, having talked about those three qualifications that we love so very much here at the podcast, let's go into a little bit greater detail into them and really set the scene for you fine folks who are unable to attend this great event. Now, we ended the list with it being put on by a group of fellow silent film lovers. That would be the Cleveland Silent Film Festival and Colloquium. And yes, it is a mouthful to say and tough to spell, but still instantly memorable. For a little backstory on the Cleveland Silent Film Festival, I want to welcome Emily Lawrence, the Executive Director of the CSFF, to the program.
Thanks for having me, Stuart. I'm really happy to be on the Golden Silent Films podcast. I'm a big fan of the show and all you do for the silent film community.
You are very welcome, and thank you so much for those kind words. It's a pleasure having you on to talk about all things Cleveland Silent Film. So, let's start this journey hot. Tell us about the Cleveland Silent Film Festival and how it came into existence.
My name's Emily Lawrence, and I started the Cleveland Silent Film Festival technically in February of 2022. It came out of a lot of earlier experiences with silent film, especially living in San Francisco and going regularly to the San Francisco Silent Film Festival, which became kind of an ideal for that sort of event. But the Cleveland Festival started as a winter term project when I was teaching at Oberlin. I had this idea of getting the Mont Alto Motion Picture Orchestra into work with students on a winter term project whereby they, or at least Rodney Sauer, the director of Mont Alto, would work with the students and have them score a film or a series of short films. That worked out really well, but in order to make it all worthwhile, I also scheduled them to do other events at Cleveland Cinematheque, where they had played before, but they did a few events there, and also at the Apollo Theater in Oberlin. So we had many events. We had the student event, we had the Oberlin event, we had the Cleveland Cinematheque event. But then I also partnered with some people who had been working on a tribute to John Stepan Zameshnik, a Cleveland-born composer who is a pioneer in film music scoring. He really started a lot of the impetus behind photoplay music because he worked as the music editor for Sam Fox Corporation Music Publishing, which published some of the first photoplay music available. And I knew this, and so I partnered with these people, so we made it into a kind of a Zameshnik tribute festival. So it was really not one organization. It started out as a festival that was sponsored by many organizations, collegiate organizations, arts and civic organizations. But then many people said, "You're going to do this again, right?" And I thought, well, maybe I should try. So I formed a nonprofit. We had another festival in 2023, and then in 2024, we've been trying to try different models of presenting shows across the year rather than one single festival in one time of year. So at this point, it's now 2025, we've started a monthly series at the downtown branch of the Cleveland Public Library, which is free and has live music. And we also are hoping to do our an annual festival, our next iteration of that in September 2025. So the dates for that, they start on September 14th and then skip to the following weekend, 19th, 20th, 21st at the Cleveland Museum of Art. Our mission is not only to present quality silent film, which includes potentially contemporary films, but to present them with the best quality live music. So in our ticketed festivals, we've tried to get noted silent film musicians such as Montalto and also Clark Wilson, the theater organist. And Philip Carley has played for us more than once. The noted Dr. Philip Carley, who plays for the Eastman House Museum in Rochester. But we're also now trying to cultivate local musicians to develop the skills and the interest to score films with various combinations and various styles. So we're working with a couple of pianists who are known locally. I've encouraged people to start a chamber music group to do photoplay music, talking to improvisational artists so that we have a core group of musicians in Cleveland that are playing for our free monthly series at the Downtown Public Library. We're supported, of course, by funds from the Ohio Arts Council and Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, Cuyahoga County. But we're also supported by the local chapter of the American Federation of Musicians, the Cleveland Federation of Musicians, Local 4. And through their work, have been able to get funds through the Music Performance Trust Fund to help pay for the free monthly series. So that's all been very helpful. And also the library itself has been a really, really supportive and helpful partner to us. So that's a little bit what we do. We have a ticketed event in the fall, and then we have a free monthly series, mostly at the Downtown Public Library and also at an area church. If you want to find out more about us, it's easy to find. It's www.clevelandsilentfilmfestival.org. It's all one word. And we do have a Facebook page, Cleveland Silent Film Festival and Colloquium. So you can like us there, or follow us there, and follow our events, which are posted there. Other social media we're on includes Bluesky and Instagram. And we're looking to expand that in the coming year. So keep your eye peeled for our events and come on by and say hello before the film starts. I'd love to talk to people who are interested in silent film in Cleveland.
I think it's really awesome how your love of music and silent film have intertwined, and they eventually grew into the group you have today. It's also super cool how many events you guys put on. There really seems to be a screening going on at any given time, which I am a fan of. Now, I'm not always free to make the 2.5-hour drive to Cleveland, but at least I know there will be something to catch the following month, or even sooner, as the case sometimes is. Since we're talking about the Cleveland Public Library, now seems the perfect time to introduce that second pillar, seeing the film in a super cool venue. Now, a great film screening experience is like real estate. It's all about location, location, location. While seeing a great movie is rewarding and fun enough in and of itself, seeing the same movie in an awesome location only adds to the magic. At the beginning of this episode, you heard me live and on location recording this episode's intro from right inside the library. It was really hard to convey in the moment how incredible the Cleveland Public Library actually is. There was so much I wanted to say that it was tough to keep it to a minute or two. Walking through the halls of that place was really insane. It definitely required more than a day to properly, soak it all in. But I know what you're thinking. It's just a library, a bunch of books and shelves to put said books on. Nothing special to see there. And that is where you would be wrong. Super wrong, as the case will be. Now, the history of this library runs hand in hand with the history of Cleveland and film. Before we dive too much into the backstory of the building itself, let's kind of situate ourselves on what exactly we're talking about structurally. The whole downtown main library complex encompasses two large buildings, the Lewis Stokes Wing at 525 Superior Avenue and the historic main library at 325 Superior Avenue, both buildings connected via an underground passage. So the Cleveland Public Library as an entity has been around for quite a while. According to Case Western Reserve University, we read, "The Cleveland Public Library, one of the nation's leading public library systems, opened its doors on February 17, 1869, under the provisions of an April of 1867 Act of Ohio Legislature that had been championed by Cleveland educator Reverend Anson Smith. The act authorized boards of education in larger Ohio cities to establish boards of managers of public libraries and to levy property taxes for their support. Known as the Public School Library until 1883, and from that year as the Public Library of the City School District of the City of Cleveland, it was not until 1923 that the name was simplified to Cleveland Public Library. And as someone who has to read that, I really appreciate them shortening it to Cleveland Public Library. Though it existed, the library's physical location would change a handful of times as the years went by and the city of Cleveland grew. From a rented room of about 1,500 square feet on the third floor of the Northrop and Harrington block in the city's bustling West Superior Street commercial district, the library would hop around locations another 5 or 6 times before plans finally came together in 1916 to eventually erect a permanent downtown location. A 1916 architectural competition would end with the Cleveland architects emerging victorious and in charge of building an awesome building. Their design took a lot of inspiration from Renaissance architectural styles and would begin construction in 1923 after an understandable delay for World War I. At this point in the 20s, Linda Ann Eastman was in charge of the library, which, if you didn't know, is a pretty big deal. Eastman was the first woman to head a major U.S. city library system, and she was a pioneer in modern library system circles. She actually opened bookshelves to patrons, replacing the New York Public Library system in which a librarian would fetch you your books. According to the Cleveland Public Library website, we read, "Built for just under $5 million, Main Library opened to the public on May 6, 1925. Its cornerstone contains a time capsule with documents relating to the construction of the library and events that occurred in 1923. The terrestrial globe light fixture in the lobby features a recreation of a map by Leonardo da Vinci. Originally, not a stick of wood was used in the main library except for the flagpole due to a desire to make the building as fireproof as possible. It was all stone. Now, this library was in a number of ways ahead of its time and ahead of the curve for having been built in the mid-20s. It even employed a telegraph for communications. It's all really cool, kind of futuristic stuff for the time. But time comes for all buildings, and over time, that original 1925 building would see several renovations. Though now it sits 5 stories high, each as high as 2 stories in most buildings, and in 1957, it only expanded as the library purchased the next door, 6-story tall plain dealer building to add to the already sizable OG building next door. This addition would, after many years, be redesigned and emerge in 1997 as the Lewis Stokes Wing. The $65 million structure of fritted glass panels in Georgia marble housed 8 million items and 2 million titles on its grand opening. The 2 buildings are connected by that aforementioned underground corridor below the Eastman Reading Garden. There's so much cool stuff to see in the library, but one exhibit caught my eye mere seconds after entering the building. As a comic book nerd, and more specifically a Superman nerd, I was immediately drawn to the Superman exhibit. Cleveland, not Krypton, is the birthplace of our favorite alien Kal-El. The legendary character was created by writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joe Shuster, who met in 1932 while attending Glenville High School in Cleveland. I knew that, but had completely forgotten about it until I saw the statue of Old Supes right in the middle of the exhibit. In the exhibit, you can see Superman comics, posters, toys, photographs, and even more that all date back all the way to 1939. The exhibit changes up the items on display every 6 months, and I can confirm, I'm a nerd, I can confirm this because I own the same 3-foot-tall Superman figure the library had on display. All this cool memorabilia was donated to the library in 2016 by Mike Curtis, comic aficionado and writer for the Dick Tracy comic strip. There is so much to see, read, and experience in the Cleveland Public Library. There are always a cool mix of permanent and rotating exhibits that always make the trip to downtown Cleveland worthwhile. Before we start talking about the screening event proper, we have another library fact for all of you cinephiles out there. A 16-year-old Cleveland native, Wes Craven, worked at the library as a page and bookshelver from 1955 to 1956. One of the other things I found super cool about this screening at the Cleveland Public Library was how invested the library was in the Cleveland Silent Film Festival screening. This wasn't a situation where they just provided a screen and were hands off the rest of the way. The library actually went above and beyond to add immersion and ambiance to the watching of Her Sister from Paris. They did so much that I was bummed not to be a Cleveland resident because I wanted to take out some of their books. Alright, let me explain. As you walked into the screening theater, off to the side was a huge table completely filled with silent film-centric books. From biographies to analysis, the table assortment had so much available, and they were ready for rental or whatever taking home a library book is called. There were so many cool books I had no idea even existed, which made me jealous of the Clevelanders that were legally allowed to take these tomes home. One of these days, at a future screening, I'm totally going to go super early and squeeze in all the research I can before the film starts. It was really awesome stuff. Now, that leads us all back to the first pillar, which is seeing a new to us movie. We definitely got that with 1925's Her Sister from Paris, starring Constance Talmadge and Ronald Colman. This was a flick I had no idea existed, starring an actress who I knew almost nothing about. I was going in completely blind, and what an experience it was. Her Sister from Paris was released on August 2nd, 1925. It was directed by Sidney Franklin and based off a novel called The Twin Sister, written by Ludwig Fulda. This almost 100th anniversary screening would take place on March 15th, 2025. Let me preface this film breakdown by saying that the plot of the film plays like an episode of Three's Company, so some amount of disbelief by the viewer will be required. I don't necessarily say that as a bad thing. You just shouldn't think too deeply about things and just kind of go with the flow. There are still some issues, but we will discuss those after the fact. So, plot summary time, folks. The film takes place in Vienna, Austria. Joseph Weiringer, played by Ronald Colman, is a novelist who believes that his wife Helen, played by Constance Talmadge, is too domestic, too boring. Their marriage has become dull. Things go off the rails and the plot really begins in earnest when Helen interrupts her husband and a quarrel ensues. She packs her stuff and leaves her jerk of a husband. After she leaves, Joe is going through the mail and finds what he believes to be a sexy pic of his wife. This photo shows his wife in a fancy and revealing gown. He turns it over and the mystery is revealed. It is his wife's twin sister, the famous Parisian dancer La Perry, and she has written to her sister to tell her that she has a big show coming up in Vienna. He is instantly smitten by his wife's sexy and apparently unknown to him twin sister. A very strange narrative strategy, I must say. Let's take a minute to talk about the director, Sidney Franklin. The future director and producer would be born on March 21st, 1893, in San Francisco, California. Franklin, 2 years after making this film, would again helm a picture featuring a dual role. He was the director of 1926's Beverly of Graustark, which we featured a few episodes back. He was a fairly prolific director through the teens, 20s, and 30s. But directing wasn't all he was good for. He would also produce and act. Quite a talent whose career went well into the 50s. Sidney Franklin would die on May 18, 1972 at the age of 79. The director-producer was buried at the famous Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Turning back to film action, when Helen leaves, she makes her way to the train station to catch the train to her mom's place. There, she runs into her twin La Perry, who has just arrived in Vienna. Helen tells her twin about her problems at home and how she has just left her husband. This gives La Perry an idea. The two will use some twin magic to save Helen's marriage. Joseph and his buddy go to the performance where he falls even harder for the dancer. An invitation comes to the sister La Perry to attend supper after her performance with Joseph, whom she has never seen. She accepts, only to send Helen to supper in her place. I should point out that Constance Talmadge did great work in this character double dip. Aiding in her dual role, the filmmakers really went above and beyond to add believability to the film's premise. From clever angles to other on-screen trickery, I bought into the twin sister gimmick fully. Now, we made a big deal earlier about this being our first Constance Talmadge film, so we would be remiss in our duties if we didn't take a quick detour into her life. Constance, the youngest of the three acting Talmadge sisters, was born on April 19, 1928 in Brooklyn, New York. She began her screen career in 1914 and started to make a name for herself in D.W. Griffith's 1916 film, Intolerance. From the teens into the 20s, Constance was killing it, absolutely killing it. She was constantly working, appearing in picture after picture after picture. In fact, all three sisters were huge stars during their runs, though Constance would leave the business roughly when sound was making its presence felt in Hollywood. In fact, Her Sister from Paris was one of the last handful of films Constance Talmadge would appear in. Constance Talmadge died of pneumonia on November 23, 1973, at the ripe old age of 75 in Los Angeles, California. Like Sidney Franklin, who dies the previous year, Constance was also buried in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. In addition to leaving her mark at Grauman's Chinese Theater, she would also receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 6300 Hollywood Boulevard. Turning back to Constance's performance, Helen is believed to be the dancer by Joseph. The two make love, and Joseph proposes that they elope. She persuades him to go to the same hotel where he had spent his honeymoon with Helen. When they are given the bridal suite, he confesses that he cannot go on because he loves his wife. He is then confronted by his wife, who is really his sister-in-law. This satisfies Helen that her husband still loves her, and we get our arguably happy ending. This was an interesting film on several levels, and at its conclusion, I didn't really know how to feel about it. From a pure on-screen perspective, Her Sister from Paris was a good-looking feature with some fun performances. Constance was a great surprise to see. Like I mentioned earlier, I've seen her name around but never really saw any of her work. It was a delight to finally, put a performance to the name and to put a face to the name as well. She provided great laughs with solid physical comedy whilst also pulling double duty. She did a fantastic job portraying two distinct characters. So much so that there were moments I forgot that it was the same actress. Really, all of the performances in this film were good to great, and it told a story. That is where the mixed feelings start to trickle in. When you look at the film from the view of what the story has to say, that is where things get a little murkier. Joseph, the husband, is at the heart of the murkiness. He's just not a good guy. The fact that he is so willing to step out on his wife is terrible. The fact that he wants to do it with her sister, even worse. There is really no redeeming value to the moral of this story. Usually, in a traditional rom-com, people make some sort of mistake and everyone learns a lesson and the viewer is happy to see the two main characters reunite. With this film, however, I was actively rooting for Helen to come into her own, learn about herself, and kick that jerk to the curb. Alas, that was not the ending we got. Now, I was not the only person to find the narrative kind of yucky. Let's turn to one of our favorite silent film websites, Movies Silently, and get their take. We read, Her Sister from Paris was based on The Twin Sister by German playwright Ludwig Fulda. Frankly, some European sophistication would have done wonders for this tale. It's practically screaming for the Lubitsch touch, and director Sidney Franklin ain't no Lubitsch. What should be charming, sly, and ever so slightly naughty comes off as just plain skeezy. Now, this basic plot was not an unwinnable situation. I mean, it could have been done to great effect. Movies Silently continues, this sort of plot was pulled off successfully in several American productions. The I cheated on my wife with my wife plot was charmingly essayed by Charlie Chase in Mighty Like a Moose, and the Wives Should Be Lovers 2 plot was pulled off with aplomb by Cecil B. DeMille in Why Change Your Wife. On the live audio side of things, let's talk about something I really did enjoy. I really loved the live accompaniment provided by David Blazer on piano. He did a fantastic job of bringing the film to life through music. The musical accompaniment, in fact, really did the impossible and made me way more invested in a fairly unpalatable storyline. He was able to accentuate the comedy bits and really explore the dual nature of Constance Talmadge's roles in the film. If you are near any live accompaniment being performed by the aforementioned David Blazer, do yourself a favor and definitely check him out. I can yammer on, but I am but a mere spectator in this instance. Let's turn back to the wonderful and charming Emily Lawrence for a bit of a wrap-up of this awesome event. It's not very often, Emily, that I can get an event's organizer's post-show thoughts, so I have to know, what were you thinking about this event post-show?
We were really, really pleased with the event that we started out, our series with at the Cleveland Public Library back in March. The first film that we chose for the series at the free series at the Cleveland Public Library was Her Sister from Paris. And we chose it for a few reasons. First of all, it came highly recommended to me by people I know in the silent film world. Both Rodney Sauer and Philip Carley, excellent silent film musicians, had reassured me that it plays really well to modern audiences. It is a very modern feeling comedy of manners, shall we say. It's not so topical that people can't identify with it now. And it shows off the two stars, Constance Talmadge and Ronald Colman, to great advantage. Especially Talmadge is just at her best in her dual role. She's playing twin sisters, one a very dowdy kind of hausfrau, and the other happy-go-lucky, like high-living dancer in Paris. And the two of them get together in a kind of scheme to fool the wife's husband, who's played by Ronald Colman. So first, I just chose the movie because I knew that it would have some broad appeal. But the other thing about the movie is it's from 1925, and the Cleveland Public Library this year is celebrating the centennial of their main building, their main downtown building. And we're helping them do that by highlighting a lot of the best films from 1925. So this was, I think, a really good choice to start. It was fun. People really responded well to it. I thought the musician, David Blazer, did an outstanding job with the score. And then we had a nice opening reception, which I got a lot of good feedback from people. So all in all, it's wonderful to put on a show downtown Cleveland where a lot of people come together. It's, kind of the crossroads of the city. It has a great auditorium in the Lewis Stokes wing, which is where we put it on, with a lot of great support. So all in all, I was very, very pleased with our opening event in March with Her Sister from Paris.
I am so happy to hear things were as great from your perspective as things were from mine. And I also look forward to catching more of those 100-year-old films at the library throughout the upcoming year. With our event now behind us, let's stick around the greater Cleveland area and look at some of the silent, cinematic, and historically relevant bits of the land. As a Pittsburgher through and through, I was really quite surprised to see how much the nearby city of Cleveland has contributed to the fabric of movie history. From the silent era till today, Cleveland is a city steeped in silver screen magic. And who better to get a preview of that history than from a Clevelander proper? I can go on and on and on, but I am a Pittsburgher, so my thoughts on Cleveland are suspect at best. So, Emily, give us a little taste of what Cleveland has to offer the cinematic world from that silent era.
I think Cleveland is a great city in which to have a silent film festival. One thing I'm conscious of is that, the silent films really came of age at the same time that American industry was coming of age. The American city was coming of age, and that applies to Cleveland as well. A lot of how Cleveland sees itself, how it defines itself, the infrastructure of the city, the major businesses of the city, a lot of those were first founded or created or established in the early part of the 20th century. So when we see films, American films particularly, that are made in the teens and the 20s, we're seeing a kind of a general history that applies to a lot of, especially northeastern and midwestern cities as they built up their industry, their commerce, and their population. In the 20s, I think Cleveland, I believe, was maybe the sixth largest city in America. It was a very major economy. John Rockefeller, of course, started Standard Oil in Cleveland before moving to New York. And there was it was a crossroads of a lot of American commerce because of the Great Lakes and also railroad lines. So those things, for me anyway, connect Cleveland to that era of the classic silence. But then beyond that, in a very literal sense, Cleveland had a lot to do with the early silent film industry, particularly when you're talking about silent film music. So a very important figure in silent film music was born and raised and started his career in Cleveland, and that's J.S. Zameshnik. Zameshnik was a composer born in Slavic village to a Czech family, and he was born into a family of musicians. His father and his uncle were both band directors, and Zameshnik himself had a flourishing career in Cleveland. He became the director of music at the Hermit Club, a private club that was devoted to amateur theatrical entertainments, but it was a very prominent business club. It still exists in Playhouse Square. So he had that job, but then he had a really big job, which was the music director at the Hippodrome Theater, which was the largest theater, I believe, in Cleveland, and wasn't, when it started, a film theater. It was really much more of a live production, opera and musical theater venue. And so Zameshnik had a very prominent music director role there. But then when you're talking about Zameshnik in film, he became the music editor-in-chief for the Sam Fox Corporation. The Sam Fox Corporation was a music publishing company, and they got into film music very early on in the teens in Cleveland. And they were one of the first outfits to realize that there was a market for music for films that they could help fill. And they were one of the earliest companies to start publishing what we now refer to as photoplay music. That is music that is scene length, just a short musical number, a cue, you would say, for a particular scene, and the job of that musical number would be to match a certain type of scene. So people published musical cues that were called A Gruesome Tale, or Misterioso number 1, or Hurry, suitable for chases, or a love scene. Things that would try to capture a particular mood of just a scene in a film. And a lot of these were very stereotypical scenes. You could predict certain kinds of scenes in certain kinds of films. And so these musical cues were treated in a modular fashion. You could make a whole score by compiling these musical cues together. And Sam Fox found this market and was a big supplier for it for theaters all over the country. So when Zameshnik signed on with Sam Fox, he wasn't just the musical editor-in-chief, he was the main composer. He was the house composer for these film music cues. He was so busy, in fact, that he tried to make it seem as though there was a whole staff of composers, and he used a lot of pseudonyms to give this impression that there were many composers working for Sam Fox, but mostly it was Zameshnik. And as a result of all this activity in Cleveland, the Cleveland Public Library now has one of the major collections of silent film photoplay music in the country in their special collections. So it's another way in which we can highlight the connection to Cleveland, the connection to the Cleveland Public Library and early film history is by talking about this composer and using some of his compilation scores for our events, which we have been doing. So that's another way in which Cleveland is a really good fit for a silent film festival. Some of this we've been able to celebrate with films that are specific to Cleveland. In 2023, we showed a charming half-hour, you would call it maybe an infomercial, but it's a short. It's around a half an hour long, put out by the Illuminating Company of Cleveland, and it's an infomercial celebrating the electrification of the area of Northeast Ohio, and it follows two children from a farm as they explore Cleveland, like in an airplane, and they go to the power plant, and they go to grand homes that have electrification, and they find out all the things that electrification can do. So we showed that as a way of connecting silent films to the burgeoning new industrial economy of Cleveland. And then, of course, there are some other figures that are from Cleveland. People like Roland West, the director of, you would call proto-noir films or kind of comedy horror films like The Bat and The Monster. He was from Cleveland, and we're going to highlight some of his films next year. The Bat has its centennial next year. And actors such as Ralph Graves were from Cleveland as well. So it's someone who starred with Mabel Normand in The Extra Girl. So we're trying to highlight figures from Cleveland as much as we're able to as well.
That is some pretty incredible stuff that not many folks really know about. And it's also a true sign, Emily, that great minds think alike, since a lot of your picks really stood out to me as well as we look at the silent story of Cleveland. Earlier in the episode, we talked about how cool it is to see a silent film in a really great venue. The silent era definitely had its fair share of movie houses fit for kings and queens, and Cleveland was no different. At this point in time, post-World War I, business magnates and entrepreneurs saw dollar signs when it came to bringing entertainment to downtown Cleveland. Local developer Joseph Larong envisioned a row of theaters on Euclid Avenue between East 14th and East 17th Streets. Larong and New York City business magnate Marcus Lowe, among others, founded a partnership called Lowe's Ohio Theaters to develop the area. there would eventually be 6 theaters in the Playhouse Square district of Cleveland, by my count at least. This group included the Stillman, which we're about to talk about, the Ohio Theater, the State Theater, the Hanna Theater, and the Allen Theater. The last to be constructed was the Palace Theater in 1922. This explosion in entertainment real estate came over a span of 19 months in the early 1920s, resulting in theaters becoming a major entertainment center for the city for a great part of the 20th century. Let's turn our attention back to the aforementioned Stillman Theater. According to an article on Case Western Reserve University's website, we read, "The Stillman Theater was among the most elaborate motion picture houses in the U.S. It was conceived by Emanuel Mendelbaum, owner of Knickerbocker Theater at East 83rd and Euclid Avenue, who wanted to open a downtown theater showing silent films instead of featuring vaudeville performances. The Stillman opened in 1916 on the former estate of Stillman Witt, a railroad builder at 1115 Euclid Avenue, and had a seating capacity of 1,800. A luxury hotel on the site, also called the Stillman, had been raised in 1902. As one of the 3 downtown outlets of the Lowe's movie chain, it shared first-run MGM feature films with the State and the Ohio theaters. The Stillman was the first Cleveland venue to present The Jazz Singer in 1928 and Gone with the Wind in 1940. The Stillman closed on July 28, 1963, although, for a period, remnants of the lobby were visible from the Statler garage entrance. All of those dates and locations are well and good, but what did this movie palace look like? The silent era was one of the best times to be alive if you were into architecturally amazing movie theaters. Just surfing the web and looking up pictures of silent movie houses from back in the day always manages to elicit a gasp or two from me. I hold the movie theater experience in insanely high regard, and these buildings are what I always dream and think about when attending a movie. Jim Dubelko, in an essay for the Cleveland Historical website, takes us on a written tour. The article, which you can find on clevelandhistorical.org, we read, "The Stillman Theater itself was designed primarily by Thomas W. Lamb, an architect noted for the beautiful theaters he built in American cities in the early 20th century. As designed, the new theater could comfortably seat 1,800 patrons, with 1,200 in the main auditorium and 600 more in the balcony above. It was so elegant that one architectural critic compared it favorably to the remodeled Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, London, the Scala Regia of the Vatican, and the Strand Theatre in New York City. In addition to its elegance, the new theater had an innovative type of satin movie screen, which was set at the rear of the theater's stage, and an orchestra pit directly in front of the stage, all designed to improve the visual and auditory experiences of the audience. The Stillman would be the cornerstone of Cleveland film viewing for decades, with its final showing happening on July 28, 1963. The final film to be shown at the historic movie house was the legendary Lawrence of Arabia, which ran for 16 weeks there, with the final, sparsely attended screening on July 28, 1963. The theater would be demolished the following month in August of 63. Though probably not shown in the majestic halls of the Stillman Theater, Cleveland Fire Department does occupy some prime real estate in the annals of film history, and more specifically, Cleveland film history. This 1903 short, released in the infancy of movie making, was produced by the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company. This film is exactly what it is purported to be, no more, no less. You see the horse-drawn fire carriages rushing down the street to a fire call. The Library of Congress website breaks down the 1 minute and 24-second actuality thusly. The subject is the activities of a fire department that can be seen coming out of the fire engine house located across the street from the camera position. The action must have been a drill or rehearsal, as the street is lined with people awaiting the arrival of the 3 pumpers, the 2 hook and ladder wagons, and the 4 personal wagons who made up the contingent of fire equipment. The man behind the camera is a name familiar to listeners of the Gold and Silent Films podcast, G.W. Bitzer. The footage itself was filmed on October 18, 1900 in Cleveland. If you have 84 seconds free, you'd like to invest them in seeing Cleveland Fire Department in action, look no further than the Library of Congress website. It's an easy breezy viewing experience, but still cool to see how the firefighters of 1900 rolled, literally. Most actualities of this early 1900s era didn't feature any music, and at such short run times, there's not much that music could really add. That would change as the film industry evolved and grew. In fact, it was in Cleveland where one of the greatest film musicians ever was born. Now, I have already learned so much from putting this episode together. For being only a couple hours away, my knowledge of Cleveland film history is incredibly small. So what a revelation it turned out to be to find out that one of the cornerstones of silent film music was born so close. That music legend is John Stepan Zameshnik. Emily, earlier in the episode, did a fantastic job of setting the scene for this legendary music man. Let's delve a bit deeper into his life, shall we? The Monte Alto Orchestra website explains, Zameshnik was one of the few film music composers who was working during the entire period from vaudeville through silent film to the coming of sound. Zameshnik's career encompassed a 15-year existence of photoplay music as a distinct genre, roughly 1913 to 1928, and his developing sophistication as an artist coincided with the development of film music and of film itself. That's some pretty heady stuff, right? Now, the modern viewer of silent films doesn't often think about the originators of that genre of music. We all know how many films are lost, but the same, if not more, is true of the music that accompanied the films. I had no idea there was any one single person so identified with the music of silent film. In fact, he wrote the music for one of my favorite films of all time, the 1927 classic Wings. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Zameshnik was born in Cleveland, Ohio on May 14, 1872. His parents were Czech immigrants to Ohio. His father, Joseph, was a musician, and that connection to music would be passed on to his son. This love of music would take young John all over the country and the world and lead to him hobnobbing with some pretty big names in the music world of the late 1800s. Music historian Bill Edwards explains, at age 15, John took courses in harmony and theory. At 18, he was sent to the Prague Conservatory of Music to study all facets of music. This included a composition class with famed composer Anton Dvorak. After 4 years, John returned to the U.S. and is listed in a 1900 census still in Cleveland as a musician living in his parents' home, and his father also listed in the same profession at age 68. The following year, John was working as first violinist with the Pittsburgh Symphony, which at that time was under the direction of operetta and song composer Victor Herbert. He spent 3 years in Pittsburgh before returning home to Ohio. Zameshnik would be in Pittsburgh from fall of 1901 through the spring of 1904. In 1904, the composer headed back to Cleveland, where he would wed the fellow Clevelander, Mary Barbara Hodis. They would have 2 children, Edwin in 1905, followed by Walter in 1907. We are all movie fans here, and what we want to learn about are those ditties Zameshnik wrote for the big screen. It was at the end of December in 1907 when the composer became the music director of the newly constructed Cleveland Hippodrome Theater, a theater which eventually started showing films. When that switchover happened, JSZ switched over as well. The film scores Zameshnik wrote would eventually be collected in book form and published by Samuel Fox. This was a new venture and avenue for being published, since music for the screen had never really been collected and printed this way before. The works came out in several volumes under the title of Sam Fox Moving Picture Music. In 1924, to develop his film music career, Zameshnik left Cleveland and moved to Los Angeles, the Monte Alto website explains. He continued to compose photoplay music for general use, and as specialty composed scores for the premieres of major features became more common, he worked on full film scores. His first effort was a collaboration with established New York composer Hugo Reisenfeld for the Paramount picture Old Ironsides in 1926. JSZ was prolific in all musical duties, but really hit his stride in the movie world. In addition to Old Ironsides, he composed the score or co-composed for films like 1927's The Rough Riders, 1928's Abby's Irish Rose and The Wedding March, followed by Betrayal and Redskin, which both came in 1929. Those are all great works, but the one that really stands out to us is an all-time favorite here in Golden Silent Films podcast land. John Stepan Zameshnik would compose the score to the incredible 1927 Academy Award-winning film Wings. This score would be recreated by a Hollywood orchestra and is likely the best example of a historic film score on home video to date. JSZ, in a 1927 interview with Metronome magazine, explained, "I wrote the score of Wings in 4 weeks. which was less time than I would have liked to do the job in. Originally, I was scheduled to have 8 weeks, and it was my intention to compose an entirely original score for this picture. However, the opening date was put forward 4 weeks, and I had to do the best I could in half the time I calculated on having. The composer continued, I immediately saw that I would not be able to write a complete original score, so I chose those episodes which most imperatively called for original music, and used other compositions for those parts of the film which they fitted. Then I came to New York to put the finishing touches on the music. Now, I never knew there was such a cool Cleveland connection to one of my favorite films ever made. But let's put a momentary pin on the Zameshnik talk and shine an electric-powered light on another historic piece of film produced in Cleveland. The story of a silent film is often overwhelmingly filled with lost and destroyed films. As a result, so many important pieces of history have disappeared into the ether. These pieces of history aren't just confined to actor performances or directorial excellence. In addition to the marquee stuff we lose, there is also a great amount of local history lost to the sands of time. Watching these old silent films really takes the viewer back in time. It's incredibly cool to see places captured in film at a super specific moment in time. How cool is it to look back to a town you are intimately familiar with now and see exactly how it looked over 100 years ago? From skylines to traffic to everyday pedestrians living life, film has the magic to transport you, becoming an important piece of visual history. That spiel, folks, is all to set the scene for a silent film from 1924 that takes us right to the whirring, mechanically electric heart of Cleveland. And its story of survival was another lucky set of circumstances that we always love hearing about here at the home office. The Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company released a nearly 30-minute film/commercial entitled The Heart of Cleveland in 1924, which the Cleveland Silent Film Festival screened during its 2023 edition. The film opens up on a family farm outside of Cleveland, telling us 50 minutes from Cleveland's public square, but 50 years from modern conveniences. This farm is one without electricity or other modern conveniences of the time. While eating dinner, the family is interrupted by a man in an airplane who makes an emergency landing in their farm field. Did I mention they were eating dinner? There is a ton of eating footage in this movie. The pilot ends up joining the family for dinner for more of that beautiful dinner footage before showing them his radio. They are pretty amazed at this new technology. The young electricless boy who is tasked with writing an essay about electricity gets the great idea, the light bulb over his head, if you will, of learning about electricity from the pilot. The pilot then offers to take the farmer's children to the big city of Cleveland to teach them about electricity. Off for Cleveland, where power, prosperity, and progress are spelled E-L-E-C-T-R-I-C-I-T-Y. Electricity. I spelled that right? Right? The next day, the pilot and children fly to Cleveland. During this segment of the movie, we are treated to cool aerial shots of the city. These are killer shots because they cover a variety of landscapes and terrains. From industrial areas to busy highways and the many buildings of downtown, there is so much cool stuff to see, and a knowledgeable Clevelander could probably pick out some of these locations. The gang then heads over to the pilot's sister's home, where they are given a tour of a home featuring the magic of electricity. You must make yourselves at home and see all of my electrical things, the pilot's sister tells the children. They see clothes being washed with electricity. They use a vacuum powered by electricity. They get ice from an icebox chilled with, you guessed it, electricity. They examine a phone and a stovetop, both powered by electricity. There really is so much stuff in this house, all powered by electric. Pretty fancy stuff that lady has, I would say. After seeing the many electrical appliances, the pilot then takes the children to the Cleveland Electrical Illuminating Company building at 75 Public Square, where they are given a tour of the offices. I wonder how the filmmakers were able to finesse such access to film there. They must have known somebody, I suppose. They then proceed to the company's Lakeshore Station, the quote-unquote world's largest steam electric plant, where they are given a tour of the facility with detailed descriptions of the many facets of the power-producing operation. This would be the heart of Cleveland we were told about in the film's title. The film explains the reach of this huge power station. We read, It serves thousands of purposes: telephones, telegraph, radio stations, and street railways. In Greater Cleveland, we supply electricity for light and power to 25,000 industrial and commercial establishments and 200,000 homes. The film ends with the children touring various industrial facilities using electricity to do a bunch of varied things like bottling milk, knitting sweaters and making clothes, unloading iron ore, melting steel, conveying steel billets, rolling steel bars, making automobile crankcases, arc welding, manufacturing brick, making light bulbs, and printing newspapers. Like I said, the uses of this newfangled electricity are shockingly varied and diverse. The film ends with the farm family entering the electric world with their home now electrified, courtesy of the expanded rural electric services of the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company. I really enjoyed this film, and if I'm going to be honest, I probably actually liked it a little bit more than Her Sister from Paris. I mean, for a minute there, I didn't even realize this was basically a commercial. Whether or not it was pushing a pro-power agenda, it was a fun watch. Especially the bits toward the end were really cool to see how the inner workings of the plant really rolled on and got the facts behind how all of that electricity was produced and how it was used. It was like a window into the past. One of the cool aspects of this film was the use of electricity. You forget that widespread use of electricity was actually not all that widespread in the teens and 20s. Nowadays, you take electricity for granted, but at the time, there were still pretty sizable pockets of people who were without that sweet, sweet voltage. We think of electricity as late 19th century, but it wasn't until after World War II before it became widespread. I think this film sort of tells the story, which makes it not only valuable as a piece of Cleveland history, but as a piece of industrial and American history as well, says Kevin Martin of the Hagley Museum and Library in Wilmington, Delaware, which specializes in industrial history. With the film story illuminated, let's look back at how this gem of a local Cleveland film was rediscovered. In 2019, the Cleveland-based Cinecraft Company donated over 6,000 cans of well-preserved 16mm film, in addition to boxes and boxes of scripts and photographs to the Hagley Museum and Library, like I mentioned, a museum specializing in industrial history. Once there, the surprise movie find was digitized and archived by the Hagley Museum and Library and restored with a grant from the National Film Preservation Foundation. Roosevelt Leftwich, a reporter with Fox 8 News in Cleveland, brings us up to speed on the modern locations seen in the 101-year-old film. Leftwich writes, "The city has changed and been through many transitions, and this remarkable film gives a glimpse into the past that helped build the city's future. A lot of the landmarks that you see in the film are gone now, namely the old Lakeshore plant. The old Illuminating Company building is still there, but it's now being given a new look." Sure, you can spend all your time watching movies about Cleveland and majestic downtown theaters with music by hometown boys made good. But what happens after the lights go down? These films need to go somewhere, right? They need to be housed in a central location for easy collection and distribution to local movie houses. The building, specially constructed in 1920 at 2100 to 2112 Payne Avenue on the southeast corner of Payne Avenue and East 21st Street, was built to be capable of a vast array of film services. You see, back in the day, theaters and Nickelodeons often bought the movies they exhibited sight unseen, and once they were sold, that was it. No return to sender on these. That seems like an issue for many theater proprietors. Eventually, the idea of renting out films rather than outright purchase soon became the norm, and film exchanges started popping up all over. That brings us back to Cleveland and its film exchange. What exactly were the services rendered by Cleveland Film Exchange? In an article from Case Western Reserve, we read, "Studios and distributors in the specially constructed building performed a film pickup and delivery service, rewound and inspected returned movies, and stored films between showings. In an age when movie theaters would change their offerings several times a week, the films had to be ready to ship. Trucks would move in and out of the Film Exchange building at all hours of the day and night to serve the more than 700 theaters of northern Ohio. At its peak, 14 national studios had offices in the building. Super service was super important, so a bunch of these places started springing up. 32 to be exact, with at one point only Detroit having a bigger film exchange than Cleveland. This era of film exhibitions saw individual theaters switching out their content quite often, up to several times a week. With films moving in and out so often, delivery trucks were in and out nearly 24 hours a day, making deliveries to the 700 Ohio theaters. Nearly 6 tons of film entered or exited the building daily. It was an incredible operation that would lead to 14 production companies taking up residence inside the building, like I just mentioned. That seems like the perfect idea, right? Housing all those nitrate films in one place. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, considering the incredibly flammable nature of that nitrate film, having a huge building filled with literal tons of potential explosives certainly had its challenges. And a challenge it certainly was. According to the National Archives, when it catches fire, nitrate film will burn fast and hot, is virtually inextinguishable, and if stored in vaults without adequate venting to release pressure, can end up with one or more explosions. In addition, the fumes produced when it burns are noxious and can sicken anyone in the vicinity. There are stages of deterioration that lower the flash point and make it more likely that a very hot day could cause a fire. It has the potential to be really scary. Turning back to the Case Western Reserve website, we learn, the fear of explosion and fire and toxic fumes in the Film Exchange was justified. The year before the Cleveland Film Exchange building opened, the Film Exchange building in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania had a fire that killed 12 people and caused an estimated $1 million in damages. A 1936 trade journal estimated that a film projectionist in the U.S. died every 18 days, partly attributable to the dangers of working with nitrate film. The folks behind the construction of this downtown Cleveland building were up for the task, though. In addition to being an aesthetically pleasing design, the architects made sure safety was a prime concern. Case Western Reserve continues, the 8-story Beaux Arts-style brick building, with a prominent water tower on top, was designed by architect John H. Graham. The floors were concrete, tables, shelves, and doors were metal in the rooms where films were stored and handled. Sprinkler systems and fire extinguishers were conspicuous in every film handling room, and all lights and radiators were protected. Most of the film storage rooms were designed with 2 doors in case one door was blocked. The rooms were inspected every 2 weeks by a safety committee, and once a week there was a building-wide fire drill. It's so cool to see downtown Cleveland play such a big role in the world of cinema across the state of Ohio. In the modern day of streaming with endless options for electronic download, the idea of such a bustling industry of physical transport and delivery is really mind-blowing. And then add in the little extra fire danger and it becomes an even more incredible story, and only adds to the legend of Cleveland as a silent city. So, that is our final stop, and with our Cleveland historical tour now wrapping up, let's find out where your favorite silent stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join the makers of film music on the other side of the cemetery gates. The history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge in Where Are They Now? Your guide to paying your respects to the Cleveland-born musicians that entertained so many throughout the silent era. Bill Edwards takes us into the later years of the prolific composer, John Stepan Zemešnik. Edwards writes, Zemešnik retired from composing for the most part in 1933 after scoring The Power and the Glory, working only occasionally as a consultant or arranger and continuing his radio appearances. As of the 1940 census, John and Mary were living near West Hollywood, California, with John still claiming to be working as a music composer. The 1950 census showed him at nearly age 78, still listed as a music composer and publisher. John stayed in the Los Angeles area for his remaining years, but was largely unknown at the time of his death, except among the remaining cadre of early film composers and silent-era pianists. His official obituary, printed in the major papers after his death at 81 in 1953, noted that he had composed the scores for Wings and Abbey's Irish Rose, but little else. Though being a son of Cleveland, the death of the composer would see his physical remains stay in Los Angeles. John Stepan Zemešnik passed away on June 13, 1953. The composer was entombed at the Inglewood Mausoleum near the Los Angeles International Airport. In a biography on the Montalto website, we get a great wrap-up of the impact Zemešnik had in the world of film and music and how, sadly, his name remains unknown. The article reads, Zamashnik's silent film cues were reused in many lower-budget sound films and newsreels throughout the 1930s. He is credited with nearly 2,000 compositions. During his lifetime, his music was played in hundreds or thousands of film theaters every night for almost 15 years. His influence on musical development and on the musical tastes of America has been almost completely ignored. And on that incredibly depressing and dour note, it's time for this road trip of an episode to come to a close, and we want to thank you for spending your valuable movie podcast time with us. It's been a ton of fun checking out the fascinating history behind Cleveland's film heritage and seeing the Cleveland Silent Film Festival working so hard to keep the magic of silent film alive in the area. Speaking of the Cleveland Silent Film Festival and Colloquium, I don't want to forget at all to give a huge thank you to Emily Lawrence, the group's executive director. It was a pleasure having you on, Emily, and seeing a cinematic Cleveland from your unique perspective.
Well, thanks again for having me, Stuart. I so appreciate the opportunity to tell everyone about our festival. And if people are interested in finding out more, they can find us on the web at www.clevelandsilentfilmfestival.org. And when you go there, please sign up for our newsletter. We're also on Facebook and Instagram under the username CLESFF. That's CLESFF, both Facebook and Instagram. And we're also on Bluesky as Harp and Silence. That's all one word, all lowercase. So you can look for our events there.
Those are all such great places to keep up to date with the Cleveland Silent Film Festival. And I can confirm you don't want to miss a screening that they put on, and it is totally worth the drive if, like us, you are several hours away. And Emily, I will put all that information in the show's description. Thank you again so much. It has been wonderful talking to you. Did you enjoy this trip to Cinematic Cleveland? What are your favorite bits of Cleveland movie lore and history? What cities should we dive into next? Tell us your favorite silent cinema locales and let us know about those super cool locations at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you have forgotten, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Bluesky. Let us know what you thought of this episode. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly expanding, and we need your input for our future episodes here and beyond. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram, at Golden Silence Cast on Bluesky, and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, and review. If you're watching it on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. All of that does a ton for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We have set a goal of getting to 100 subscribers on YouTube during the year 2025, so please subscribe and spread the word so other cool folks can subscribe as well. We really, really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much you folks are listening on all of our many platforms only makes us want to make episodes bigger and better. So, with all of that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And don't forget, the silents are golden and the talkies, they're just a fad. And visit Cleveland.